the way that you guys are designing, redistributing the money, doesn't do enough good for the whole region.
Well, that's an interesting point. There are several issues with that. One is that that presumes that the way that we as governmental entities would facilitate economic development is to spend taxpayers' money on economic development, number one. And I'm not sure, in my view, I'm not sure that that is the primary issue that we're trying to deal with. In some sense, I think it's reducing the friction of government that I think better facilitates economic development, not direct. And I think there's a good argument that the government is not in a position to pick winners and losers in the private economy. So the whole notion of trying to collect money to pour into economic development, in some sense, to me, is not the right paradigm. So I think this approach of tax-based sharing has a more fundamental influence on the motivation of local governments to stay out of the way of economic development. So I think there's a significant difference in the fundamental idea between this idea of, say, imposing a sales tax regionally and targeting it to economic development or projects here and there. So there's a significant difference in those two approaches.
Right.
And I
what does it really mean? Explain it to me as if I'm a fourth grader, because when we start talking about tax revenue versus tax base, I feel like a fourth grader.
Yeah.
So if the village of Richfield sees your tax base grow,
yes.
What happens to the tax dollars?
Well, of course, tax base translates into tax dollars, but it's a terminology issue in part. So, tax base in the case of income tax is the income base upon which the tax is imposed. And in the case of real estate, it's the value of real estate. That's the tax base. And that produces revenue based on the local imposition of tax. Okay. Now, is it valuable to try to make that distinction? I'm not sure that's really that significant. It produces revenue, and it is the revenue produced by that tax base that goes into a pool. So whether we talk about tax base or we say it's revenue, it results in some monetary component going into a pool. It's just the structure of taxation. You have tax base and you have taxation.
And so the revenue then goes into a pool, and I'm East Cleveland. I'm the mayor of East Cleveland. Do I see what happens then?
Well, there is a significance in the idea that tax base is put in the pool, because then you have a question: is what is the rate of taxation applied to that tax base for the pooling? So
because the village of Richfield has a different income tax than the city of East Cleveland.
It might be. So that trend in the pooling, there has to be some kind of aggregation of tax rates to then come up with it.
Is it me, or have you guys chosen the most complicated way to go about this?
There is no simple way to go about trying to mitigate the influence of our tax system that creates this competitive environment. We have a very complex situation in the state of Ohio. There are only 4 states that have local income tax. It's my understanding. So we have a very complex structure of local taxation. So I did not choose that system of local taxation. So you can't blame me for
I'm not
trying.
blaming you.
I'm being a little sarcastic.
Yeah.
So it is not the solution that should be blamed for being complex. It is the underlying tax system that has a complexity.
I'm just saying, though. I mean, from a lay perspective here, it's a tough sell.
Well,
partly
it is,
because it's so complex.
It is tough.
And the other piece of it is because it has to do with taxes.
Yes. Yeah. Both. But when you begin, and we don't even historically get into it or know how to get into it because it is so complex. It's just too much. So we give up.
That's why we hire accountants.
but we don't know what's going on. I mean,
Right.
as policymakers, legislators, it's and you have people, the tax base in Richfield for income tax is a lot of people who don't live in Richfield, and it's ideal for a town like Richfield. People come in, they go home at 5 o'clock, they're well behaved, and so we're shifting tax base around in our region all the time. So the notion that we're from a idea standpoint, the idea of this tax base sharing in terms of shifting, from one community to the other, we're doing that all the time. We just don't even understand how much that's going on right now.
So this is a way to capitalize on it. Is what you're saying?
It's a way to put us on the same team, rather than being on, separate teams in our approach to economic development in Northeast Ohio.
Right.
We're on different teams because each community has its own economic development strategy. It's like separate states, little city states, in a smaller scale, but that accumulates into as Mayor Norton said, competing for how much tax dollars we can give away to attract. That's a bad environment.
So is the real vision then is that we would have shared economic development priorities?
Yes.
And that the economic development priorities of the village of Richfield would actually align with the economic development priorities of the city of Shaker Heights or or Hudson or Youngstown?
Yes, but not aligned through some sort of central planning process, but aligned because our motivations are in tandem. We still operate independently, but because our interests are not divided. We can act independently, but toward a common purpose.
But then also, to go along with that, then if economic development creates tax-based growth, then then your win is actually my win.
Exactly. That fact, if we could accomplish it, that fact doesn't mean. Now, you take Mayor Anderson's proposal, which is to do a sales tax regionally. Right. Then you create a central entity that decides how to divvy that money out. You haven't created a common set of values going forward. You created a little monster that divvies out money, and that doesn't achieve this shift in paradigm. It just is another source of revenue. We have to set up another entity to figure out how to divvy out that money, and we have the government in a position of deciding how private economic development should be done and who to give the money to. There's a really fundamental difference between that approach and the idea, and I will give to you that it's complicated, and there are times when I think,
why did I ever start this thing?
Impossible. It's impossible. And times when I think there's no way I could get the council in the village of Richfield to go along with this. But so why do we continue to press that and not compromise it to, well, let's do something that's more doable? Is because then we lose the focus on what's really the underlying purpose of this. Now, so we're not willing to abandon that underlying thing, that underlying shift in paradigm that we're after, and so we're not looking for a short-term fix to something. We're really trying to bring to light in the discussion on what we perceive to be some of the fundamental motivational issues, and get people to look at that and talk about that and come up. If somebody's got a better idea, let's look at it. Mayor Anderson said, well, it's a distraction. I think I heard. I haven't.
He did say that.
It's a distraction. So I was thinking about, well, a distraction from what? If it's a distraction, what is it distracting us from? If somebody showed me something to put my effort into, I'm not. Nobody's paying me for all the time I put in on this. So that was just a thought as a response to that. Okay, well, what else are we gonna? Show me something else that we can do to move us forward. Show me what you think the fundamental issues are, and let's talk about how we address those. I don't want to be distracted, but I haven't been convinced yet that the things we're focusing on are not very fundamental issues. I think they are. Now the question is to whether we can implement something that really gets at them and begins to move us. That's debatable. That's debatable. But so far, I haven't found that as a reason to discard this idea of tax-based sharing. It's very complicated. It's too complicated for me in many ways. But again, I go back. It reflects what it does is it reflects how complicated our system is, and there are dysfunctions just by the complication of it. And that's a drag. It's a friction on the private sector development.
Okay, Mike Lyons, Village of Richfield, Mayor, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much.